Hi, we're now going to follow on from this solid roof creation by putting the kind of necessary detail on it to make it look a bit more interesting. So what I'm going to create are just a raised area in the middle that will be just like a small lead box, and this deals with the flat portion in the middle of this roof. Okay, and then we've got what we kind of call flashings, and these are needed down the hips along this small ridge. Okay, we've got hips here as well, and we've got a valley situation as well. Now I'm not going to kind of carve the valley in and create the full detail. What I'm going to do is a bit of a cheat and just do some more flashings in that area, just to make it look as if there's a valley situation there from a distance. Let me just clear that and just show you another slide and show them in kind of real life, as it were. You always find that phrase a bit strange. Okay, so here's a valley gutter situation. Okay, and I've got another little valley gutter there on this dormer window. We've got ridge flashing on the dormer and ridge flashings going across the top as well. So these give a roof a bit of character. So this can be dealt with a material texture when we render it, but we do need a little bit more to imply these shapes. So either 3D faces or solids, and I'll show you both of those. Okay, so I'll just clear that and we'll get rid of that and go back to AutoCAD proper. Okay, so I'm just going to change the colour of this roof to something a bit more neutral, so that when we put the modelled trims on, we can see where they are. Okay, so we'll just change the colour back to a pale grey or something. Okay, and I don't think I've got a layer for this. We could use this lead layer. Actually, I've used it for this small roof in front of the building, so I'll use the lead layer, but we'll just make it a different colour again, just so we can see it a bit clearer. So let's go for yellow for this. It's much the brightest colour to use. Okay, so once you've got your roof effectively modelled, then I'll just clear away those two layers. All we need to do really is just trace over the top of it, and so I'll just use a normal line for that. So I'll just trace up the ridge, sorry, up the hip there. The shape in the middle is probably the easiest one to start with. That's just a rectangle. Okay, and the extrusion height, I've got this on the elevation here. It should be pickable because the elevation is lined up with the model. So if I extrude it and take it to the same height as that point, it should just make the box that thick. Okay, all good. Okay, so the hip flashing here, so you could do this in a couple of ways. You could change to be in the UCS of that plane of the roof. So that would be a 3-point UCS from end point to any point in this plane. So this would do. This will align it. So you can see now that the x-axis is running this way, the y-axis is running perpendicular to that. Okay, so you can then draw on that plane. Okay, so I should in theory be able to use the offset command. So let's see if that works. Let's make it a bit exaggerated. Let's say 600 and just check what's happening. Okay, so that looks kind of right. It looks like it's in the right plane there. Okay, to check that, you would check the Z differences between these 2 points. So do the distance from there to there, and the change in Z should be nothing. Delta Z 0. Okay, so that would allow you to basically draw the shape of the flashing in. Okay, but an easier way, to be honest, if you're not that worried about kind of the dimensions, okay, if you just want it to look about the right width, then you can just copy the line. And actually I find this kind of easier because you can do two directions at the same time. So if I copy that line, so I've gone back, sorry, I went back to the world UCS then, You maybe did that a bit too quick. Went back to the world UCS, then copy, pick the line, and just make sure ortho's on. Pick a base point anywhere. I'm going to go this direction, and this is where you don't know necessarily what number to put in, so I'm just going to use the same number for all of these just to be consistent. I'm just going to go for 125. Okay, and then drag this way 125 as well. Okay, so everything's basically in line. You don't have to trim anything. Same at the top, everything's absolutely exact. Okay, what we'll do first is put a 3D face on that. So 3F. Okay, so pick 1, 2, 3, 4, enter. Now if we shade that, we'll notice that the surfaces are coplanar. So if we shade it, and you can see the kind of flickering pattern. Okay, it doesn't know which surface to show, so that means that those surfaces are coplanar. So chances are your flashing wouldn't show up on a rendering then, because it's kind of merged in with the other object. Okay, so this needs lifted or given some substance. Okay, now if you're not 3D printing, then quite easy just to lift that up. So we just move the surface. Base point can be anywhere, and it just needs to be a very small amount, maybe just 5 millimeters. So I had ortho on there, moved it in the Z direction. If we shade now, we'll get a very strong yellow against the grey. Okay, because there's a tiny 5 millimeter gap between the two, and you just would not see that on a rendering. It's such a small size. Okay, but if you're needing to 3D print this, you really need the object to be solid. Okay, so what you could do there is extrude it, and if you extrude a 3D face, it's going to go in the direction of the surface is pointing in its normal direction. So I'll exaggerate that. Let's extrude it quite a bit, and you can see that it's kind of heading off away from the hip of the roof. It's heading off in the direction that surface is facing. Okay, if you only extrude it a very small amount, you probably wouldn't notice. Okay, but if you want it to be kind of accurate thickness, then I would draw a line vertically and extrude along that line. So if I just draw a small line here, okay, it doesn't have to be very big, just maybe let's just stick with the 5 millimeters. Okay, so it's absolutely tiny. Okay, but you extrude along that path. I'm just going to copy it so I can use it again for this 3D face. Oh, actually, I'm being silly. You don't have to do that at all. So extrude, pick the 3D face, enter. We don't let it go whichever direction it wants. You say you want to use a path, and you pick the little line, and it has to go in that direction then. So it's basically kind of smudging it vertically. Now we don't need to actually 3D face or model the other side, okay, because it's just a mirror image of this one. Okay, now this is only kind of true if your roof pitches are the same. If you've got a different roof pitch here to here, then you would have to model both sides. Okay, but for us, nice and easy. Okay, we can just pick endpoints to use for the mirror. Okay, just before I do that, set your origin a bit closer to your objects. Whenever you use the mirror command, the object snaps always end up down at level 0, which is kind of out of view. So mirror now from endpoint to endpoint here would suffice. Okay, so just hover near that area and it's going to look for any of those. There's actually 4 endpoints there. There's 1, 2, and then 2 on the 3D face as well. So any of those endpoints will give us the right shape. And there's your flashing. So just shade that. Okay, so it's a bit different with the ridge flashing. Okay, the hip is the kind of the easiest of the bunch. So let's have a look at a ridge flashing instead. Whoops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. I meant to change the shading back to 2D wireframe. Okay, so we're still in the world coordinate system. Okay, so if we draw a line across the top here, then for this one we do really need to go into the UCS for that plane. Okay, so it's a 3-point UCS here. Okay, origin, X direction, Y direction. Okay, and what we'll do now is just copy that down the way. So I'll copy this, or you could offset. Okay, let's go 125. Okay, and while we're here, we'll draw a line down the valley, and we'll copy that 125 as well, or offset. Okay, now you can trim those. Those should be able to trim each other perfectly. Okay, and we've got a little bit of trimming to do here, so a little line to help us with that. Okay, but we've also got the 3D face needed on this side as well. The valley gutter has a face on this side and this side. So what we'll do now is change into this UCS so that we can copy this line in this direction. Okay, or the world UCS, whichever you prefer. So I'll just go for 3 point though. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then copy the line, and we'll go sideways. Actually, I think we'll offset this one, 125. A sideways smudge might be a bit small. Okay. It might be wise to extend this so that we don't see any little gap missing at the end. So if we just drag a line across and extend these two, we've nearly got the geometry we need. So all we need now is just to extend this, and it's 3D facing again. Okay, so let's do this one first, 3F. Okay, and remember the extrusion, so we just did a 5mm line and extrude it on that. So try that again, extrude. It's saying here, this is interesting, so it's saying it cannot extrude or sweep a non-planar entity. So it's implying that the 4 endpoints of this shape are not coplanar. Now they should be. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it as a rectangle instead of a 3D face. See if there's any issue with that. So I'll use a polyline instead of a 3D face. So when you draw a polyline, the endpoints have to be coplanar. Okay, so it looks like it's going to the right point there, to here, to there, and then close. So those points have to be coplanar. So that should extrude. Okay, so extrude, pick the shape. Yeah, it's behaving now. Okay, we want to go along a path, and let's try that again. Extrude. Maybe this is our path going the right way. Ah, that's maybe the problem. See, the path isn't actually going vertically. Right. So line. Okay, I didn't check it closely enough. Look at my cursor, look at the little tooltip next to it saying plus Z now, so I want 5. Right. Well, that's half the battle, knowing how to kind of solve problems. So it's easy when everything goes right. Okay, path. Okay, so that's that one. And if we now go back to the previous UCS, we've got that here, so you can just nip back to the previous one. Okay, and we could do the same with this. If we polyline around that, we could do this all in one shape. back up to the ridge and then close. Okay, I'm going to go back to the world coordinate system so I can draw my line. So I just want 5mm vertical. Okay, and then extrude along this path, and that's our little solids made. So there is a little groove in between those two. If we look there, there would be, you know, a small kind of gap or kind of a groove between them, but it's actually a little overlap. So they could be joined together. You should see a bit disappear there if we merge, if we union those two shapes, because they are solids. So you see it's kind of a little kind of collision there. Okay, and then it's really just a case then of mirroring. I'll bring the UCS a bit closer. Let's have it up here so we can see where the object snaps go. So we'll mirror that one. Okay, we could join these two together, make it simpler, less objects. I'm not likely to change them again, so they can stick together. Mirror this one using a midpoint, and mirror these two using a midpoint again. So our roof is going to look much more believable now. If we flip the colours over, it certainly would look a bit more roof-like. So if we make the lead grey, okay, and the roof a darker colour, so much darker, then it looks kind of nice and slatey, like we had in here. Okay, so that's one portion. Now I'm just going to pause the video there just to call up a photograph so you can see what I'm going to model. You should be able to see a picture now of the building that we're actually modelling here, and so we've done the roof and we've put these flashings on, you know, much simpler than they actually are. But this is the next feature. Originally this had a kind of a glass dome on it, but it's been kind of leaded over at the moment to kind of keep the pigeons out and things. So here's a bit closer view of that feature. So what I'm going to do is model the flashing that's going around the side of the object. My mouse has decided to not have any friction. That's better. So we're going to model the flashing that's kind of flat on the roof, but what we'll do is also add a vertical flashing as well. There isn't one here, but I am going to add one just to give it a bit more definition. This is going to be quite difficult to see otherwise. Okay, so in AutoCAD I've got the profiles of that object set up on the roof. So these are basically from the elevations. The curve here is kind of approximated by kind of using projections to work out where the lines would hit the roof. So you know, that's quite a laborious thing to set up, but you know, we could do all this via, you know, pretty major collisions and it would all work itself out with solids. But so you know, we could, if we wanted to, make this a bit higher to give ourselves a bit more tolerance in the kind of geometry, not relying on my drawing accuracy. So you know, when you've got solids to play with, it's much easier to do. Okay, so this is the kind of shape of the object. So let's put the lead back to a nice bright colour so we can see it. Okay, I'm going to put this onto the lead layer as well. Okay, and I have a vertical slate layer here, so I'm going to make that current just now. Okay, and I want to be in the world UCS for this, and I think I'll bring the axis a bit closer to home. So we'll bring the origin up to this point. I want it to be horizontal, not. That's better. Good. I was jumping to a 3D face there. Okay, so we'd use the revolve command for this one. There is the kind of risk that we lose control of how many facets the object has. So if that's the case, then you'd actually be best to kind of sweep a shape around a polygon. So I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to risk it and go with a revolved surface. Okay, so you pick the object. Okay, and then you want the axis that you're going to revolve around, and this will be 360. So full circle. Okay, and while we're here, we may as well. Well, actually, we'll leave the top till slightly later. We'll not complicate. We'll be able to see through things a bit easier if that's the case. Right, but how does this collide with the roof? Okay, we need a copy of the solid roof. So there's going to be a lot of roof copying going on. So copy, pick the roof, enter. I'm not going into this area because there's too many endpoints. Okay, I'm just staying a bit clear of it and letting the object snaps gravitate to the corner. So endpoint, come away, come back to the same place. Okay, now subtract, and we can subtract from this cylinder, enter, pick the roof just once, and that will lose that roof but give us a trim through the object. Okay, we're going to need to do that with this surface as well, but we'll kind of come to that in a second. Okay, so the horizontal flashing is an offset of this circle. Okay, so we could do either the horizontal one first or the vertical one first. It's not much difference. Okay, so offset that, and we've been using 125 everywhere, but I think I'll make these a bit smaller, just a little bit smaller. Make these 100. Okay, so we want to extrude both of these. So let's go to that layer. So when the new objects arrive, they go onto that layer. So I'll extrude both of them. Okay, plenty of capacity on that. Sorry, before I do that, I'm going to copy this first circle so we've got one to use in a second. So we'll copy that. Okay, just look for an endpoint somewhere. This will do, and come back. Okay, so we've got two circles there. You can see they're slightly brighter. That's the indication that there's two objects on top of each other. Okay, extrude now. Pick 1, 2, enter. Okay, don't need to use any numbers there. Subtract one from the other. Okay, subtract from the big one, enter, take the small one. So we've got a cylinder now. Okay, and what we want to do is just get a slither of that cylinder by basically copying the roof upwards by 5 millimeters, copying it down again by 5 millimeters, and then subtracting one of those shapes from the other. So we're ending up with a roof skin that's only 5 millimeters thick. Okay, might be wise to zoom in a bit closer at the end here so we can see that things happen. And what I'll do is I'll make this layer current and make it a bit brighter so we can see it. Okay, so we're needing to be 3 roofs, so there'll be 2 here and then 1 above it. Okay, so let's copy. Okay, onto itself first, and then upwards 5 millimeters. Okay, now subtract the lower one from the upper one. Subtract from the upper one, we're taking the lower one. Okay, so we've got a roof now. One of these is only 5 millimeters thick. Okay, now what we could do is just let's move the original one away. Okay, I'm just going to move it this way by 50 meters, just so we can see what happens. So 50,000. Okay, can bring it back in a second. Okay, so at the moment things look solid. Okay, but what we're going to do is use the intersection command instead. So it's intersection of this object, enter, sorry, you need to pick them both at the same time. So intersect of these two objects. So that gives us that kind of disc now. So that's a very kind of awkward shape to create. Okay, because it's kind of elliptical and pretty difficult to work out, but just using solids makes it much easier. Okay, now we need the vertical one, so we want to be coming up the cylinder this time. So this is going to be a very thin cylinder that goes vertically, so offset by 5mm again. So it's really narrow, just make sure you go the right way with that as well. Extrude both of those. Okay, let's put them onto, let's make this the current layer and match that to that. Okay, it's showing grey there because we've got one cylinder inside the other, so we need to subtract one from the other now. So I've got to get a bit closer so we can see it. Ah, because one of them's still grey. That's okay. So subtract from the outer one, enter, take the inner one. So we've got a very thin drum now. Okay, and then we can use our roof again. So 2D wireframe. So we'll do the same thing again, but this time we're going up 100 instead of up 5mm. So let's copy. Okay, copy it onto itself first, so we've always got one to work with, and then we're going up 100. Okay. Then we want to subtract from the top one, enter, take the lower one. Okay, now move that one back by our 50,000 and do the subtraction, sorry, do the intersection again, and we should get it looking pretty interesting. So it's intersection of this and this, enter, and that gives us the vertical surface. So if we shade that, we've got the flashing coming round like that. Okay, so let's bring the roof back. Okay, 50,000. Okay, and we've still got this to revolve as well. So revolve. Okay. Axis is here, and we want 360 again. Okay, now we've got a collision at the back there, but luckily it's all absorbed into the same objects, so we kind of lose that there. If we want to be really tidy with things, you know, we could do subtractions there. Probably easier just to actually merge them all. So union there. So if I union these objects together, then we'll be able to see a bit more clarity how they actually kind of join. Okay, now all of that could be subtracted from the roof again, and that will tidy up the kind of bit that's kind of colliding into the roof. So let's just copy the roof one last time. Okay, and then do a final subtraction on the yellow. And that's given us the kind of cleaner geometry. Okay, bit of 2D stuff in there that can go now. And that is our roof very nearly done. The final touch is to put some gutters onto this. So I just need a gutter profile. We'll do these in lead as well, because they probably would be lead. No, they'd be iron actually. So let's create a layer for gutters. So it'll be 2R. I'll just call it gutters. Keep my capital letters. And let's give it a colour so we can actually see it. Let's go blue, I think. Okay. So I'll use the front coordinate system for this. I just need to polyline this shape. Now for the gutters, I don't really need a curve here. A faceted shape would be ample. We can use smoothing in 3D Studio to give us the smooth rendering on that. So what I'm going to do is divide that, okay, but just by like 5 or 6, let's say 6. Okay, my point size is a bit big there, so PD size, let's just go for 5mm. Okay, if you don't know how to get the points to show like this, it's PD mode, and I use a setting of 66. If I used 33, the points look different. Okay, so 99, get different points. Okay, but I just generally use 66. Okay, so what we need is that shape. Okay, so polyline from there to perpendicular to endpoint, node, 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 end, and close. So we're just approximating that shape. It doesn't have to be, you know, in the same detail. It's a very tiny feature of the building, really. Okay, let's make sure we're on the correct layer. To gutters. Okay, and put this onto the gutters. Oh, I already had a gutters layer. Sorry. Okay, world coordinate system again, and let's move this over to the model. Okay, I'm going to go from, I'll go from the tip of the roof. I think that'll be an easier place to locate. Okay, and for this I'm going to go to the middle here. So when you're extruding right around a rectangular object, it's actually kind of wiser to not try to start at a corner. Sometimes the extrusion doesn't know which way to go. So going from a midpoint actually works better. So I'm going to polyline all the way around, and I'll deal with the kind of what happens at this junction in a second. Okay, come back to the start. So I'll close that. Okay. Always a bit tricky doing an extrusion where you're not at a corner, so we'll have to check on the other side of the roof that things are in the right place. So extrude, enter. We want to follow a path. Okay, so let's just make sure we're in the right place. It's looking pretty good. Let's just put a roof, let's put one of the wall details back on so we can check that for sure. This should confirm, and forgetting what layer we put them on. Was it string course? No. Cornice. It was cornice, wasn't it? Where is that cornice layer? That's the test. So it should be sitting directly above the cornice, which it appears to be. So, you know, watch out. Extrusions can, you know, very often go wrong. It's a pretty hard bit of maths for the computer to do. So, you know, give it a chance, check it, make sure it's working correctly. Have a look at that. So we've got the corner detail here, the cornice, the gutter, the roof slate, and then the flashings. Okay, and over here, really we should trim out the bit of gutter here. It is just kind of running through. So if we go to 2D wireframe, and let's just create a big box there. Okay, and a rectangle And if we extrude that up, and we can subtract now from the gutter, enter, pick the box we just created, and that should just create a little break in the middle. Seems to be an extra wide line there, a bit of stuff we've used before, I don't need. Okay, so pretty much model complete, I think. If I switch all the layers back on now. Okay, we've got a bit of iron work, which I am not going to do just now because it's a bit tedious, so I'm just going to leave that. So that is my finished number 2 rose angle Dundee. Okay, dilapidated garage, the roof's fallen in years ago. Okay, building's in pretty poor repair, some big holes in the back, so some nice projecting windows that were there that are now gone. But I think we're good. I don't see any gaps, I don't see any holes in the model anywhere. I think it's all in decent order.